Welcome to another episode of the Straight Up Chicago Investor Podcast. I'm Tom Shawcross. With me, as always, my partner in crime, Mark Ainley. Mark, was that intro good enough for you?
That was good. It's good. It's funny. I always see you like ramping up the deep breath to do that. So that was good. I could tell by how deep of a breath you take of how much energy is going to come out. So that was good.
You know what? I walked into the Southwest building, Jackie and Ivan's thing, and someone walked up to me and went, "Welcome." And I was like, "All right." Thought that was funny.
That is awesome. And just one thing that people have been helping us out more was getting some reviews and sharing with friends. I've heard a lot more people reach out to me and say that they were referred by somebody, and they reached out to me after they listened to an episode and they had a question or whatnot. But so, you know what? We ask you for reviews. That's awesome. If you give them, you get to enter the Chicago Fact. If you leave us a review at any of these places, we're tracking that. And then at the same time, your friends, your network, your parents, maybe your parents looking to buy an investment property. There's a lot of information for anybody looking to invest here in the Chicago market. So please share this with your community. If you feel the show has helped you, it could help somebody else. And that's what me and Tom are here for, to help.
Yeah, man, we got it this far. Let's keep it going, right? Let's keep creating the community. The more we have, the stronger we are. So again, appreciate it and keep this train moving forward. So today's episode, man, we geek out on some things. This is nice.
Well, we went deep. We had an inspector on a dozen or so episodes ago. We kind of went very high level, and today we went deep into each area. And we talked so specific on Chicago construction or Chicago building types. It was super valuable. I actually learned a few things too today.
Yeah, so very good. I know we went kind of long, so let's keep this short. Let's jump in. What's the housing provider tip of the week?
All right. So one thing that drives me crazy is all the old cabling on the side of buildings. So it might be old cable, internet, all the coax cable that's on there. And when people are living there, you can't take it down because you just don't know whose it belongs to. I made that mistake. But if you're buying a building and it's 2 flat and it's vacant, or 3 flat, take that opportunity to remove all those wires. Most people are coming in your buildings these days and they're going to get, Hulu, or they're not going to have coax cable type service. So take this opportunity. And if they were going to get that, then they're going to run different wires anyways. And that's why you have such a convoluted spiderweb mess of wires, because every new tenant that was getting some sort of coax setup like DirecTV or something like that had a different wire running out of the unit. So there's no better time when your building's vacant. It doesn't cost too much, and just make sure you're not touching the electric lines. So, and it's always easy to trace the electric lines because you can watch what goes to the pole to the building, and you can see what runs around there. So,
good stuff. I like it. All right, let's jump in. So today's guest, first off, Alex Martinez. We thank you for the intro. We have two guys. Mark, I feel like you've been doing this for a long time. These guys have been in the industry, just killing it for many, many years, seen it from so many different perspectives. I mean, I was trying to do the math. They've probably walked tens of thousands of buildings, right? Just the accumulated knowledge from doing this year over year and seeing all these different situations. And I'm just really excited to have him on. We have a great chat here. So without further ado, from RCI Inspectors, George Meegan and Dean Cushing. Welcome to the show. How are you guys doing today?
Doing great. Thank you for inviting us to your podcast.
We are excited to have you. Alex Martinez, thank you for the intro. You've been a huge asset to the show here. And also congrats on your 3-unit you just purchased, as a little side note. But so George, Dean, you guys, from our minimal conversation, you guys have a very great background I want to talk about before we start talking about specifics of inspections. So give the listener just a little bit of context. Where did you guys come from? And just some of that knowledge you've amassed over the years.
Well, I've been in the industry quite a while. Basically, I started out as a building maintenance man, and then moved into becoming a stationary engineer, licensed stationary engineer. Moved on up to a chief stationary engineer. Then I decided to get into the mechanical industry, and I was in as a mechanical contractor for 30 years prior to becoming a home inspector and a commercial inspector. So I've seen a lot of different buildings, seen a lot of different systems, and I've learned a lot through basically on-the-job training, we'll say, things that I saw that were problems that needed to be resolved. And that has translated over into my inspection career because of the vast things that I've seen I'm able to spot difficulties or observe things that could become potential problems and help a client to find the resolution to those things. In that.
All here in Chicago? You born and raised here?
Yes, I was.
Where at?
Yeah.
What neighborhood? What part of the
I
city?
was actually born on the south side in Beverly Terrace and that. And then as I became older, a teenager, we moved to Park Ridge, went to Maine South and that. And then from there,
Wow, he's a
I
hawk.
stayed in the stayed around the area in that. Now, 3 years ago, I moved from the Chicago area, sold my home. I actually live out towards Galena now in that. And I travel back to the city to do my inspections and that. So,
Oh,
but
see,
it's
St.
nice.
Charles is not that far west for all you listeners. They always give me a hard time about driving home from these events. So,
Dean, how about you?
I got into this about 20 years ago doing home inspections, and then when the market crashed in 2008, started getting into 203Ks and home style loans, and now moving back into doing the home inspections and radon testing, and still doing consulting a little bit.
How did you just go, I'm going to be a home inspector, right? Like 20 years ago, how did you come to that conclusion that this is what I'm going to do for the next 20 years?
My job was moving to Mexico, so it was time for a career change.
There you go. All right. And out of necessity, and here you are 20 years later.
Yes.
So, and then just tying it all together, how do you guys know each other? Where did your paths originally cross?
Ashy. Nick Ashy at a home inspection meeting.
Yeah. I think that's where we first met in that. And then we had other inspectors that were friends of ours that knew both of us and that. So we'd meet, different times and that. But Dean and I would do a lot of collaborating at the meetings and talk about inspections that we were on and that and different finds and kind of bounce back and forth with one another or ping pong different ideas about different things. Based on our backgrounds, Dean had more of a structural than I did, and I was more mechanical in that. So we kind of complemented each other. And, a couple of years ago, a little over a year ago, we decided that it might be a good thing for us to get together so that we could have a lot more for our clients in that. So we decided to come together and form RCI Inspections, and the rest is kind of history at the moment.
Dean,
Right.
you born and raised here in Chicago too?
No.
Hey, we let an outsider in.
Yeah, I was born in March Air Force Base, Riverside, California. And we moved around a lot, and then it was in England. Then we moved here to Chicago, then back to California for a while, then Atlanta, then Florida, and then back here.
All right.
And now we're up in Grace Lake.
We're going to jump into, walking through a lot of the different line items, some things that are commonly missed in inspection. Before that, and I ask every inspector this, whether I'm the listing agent or, it's my people buying, give me that horror story. Give me like the worst property you have walked into. Because, I walked into a lot of distressed stuff, but I want to hear the, oh my God, the building's falling down type of one that you got called on to inspect. Give us one that you walked in and said, oh my God, I got to call my partner. This is ridiculous.
That was in Chicago. The building was actually leaning. Someone had redone the attic, and it was a wood framed, and it was leaning.
Like how heavy? Like, do you walk in there and it's just like visibly noticeable?
Visibly noticeable from the street.
Ah.
Oh man.
Oh.
George, how about you?
Yeah, I had one over on the north side that was a property that was set back. And when you looked at it, like Dean said, you could see that the wall on the south side was actually bowing out. And when you were walking inside the building, I mean, the actual floors were flexing up and down. And that, I mean, it was an older timber building in that, and it had dried out substantially and pulled away from the walls, the framing members and that. So it was pretty intense. And at that point, when I was speaking with the client and showing them that, they decided at that point that they were going to negate the contract because it just wasn't going to hold up. It wasn't in their project to actually rebuild the house. So it was a disaster all the way around.
All right. All right. So there's a lot of ways we can take this. I think let's start with just some of the specific misses that you guys see during an inspection, right? And maybe we can take this almost, line item by line item, like going from roof to plumbing, et cetera. So why don't we just start there? For our listeners, we have a lot of people buying 2 to 4 units here in the city. So a lot of flat roofs. So why don't we start there? If you're getting on the roof, talk to us a little about some of the things you're looking for. Maybe talk through when you're looking just not at the membrane, but the parapet wall, et cetera, the coping stones. Some of the things that you're looking for, our listeners should be aware of, and things that you feel get missed from maybe a more novice inspector.
Well, I would say basically when Dean and I are looking at a property, we're kind of looking at it in a holistic fashion, okay? Because all the systems have to work together with one another in order for the building to operate properly. So when we get on a roof, if we're looking at a membrane roof, we're looking to see if that membrane has been wrapped up over the parapet wall, because that's a classic problem that you find when you wrap that roofing up over the parapet wall. The driving rain coming in on the other side, we need to have evaporation there. But if the roof membrane is there, it can't go through and evaporate. So it goes back out the other way, and it creates, spalling and deterioration of the brick and the mortar in that. So best practice is to have that terminate roughly 12 to 18 inches up that parapet wall. And then we should have a terminal bar strip. And a lot of times we do see the terminal bar strip there, but we just see the thin aluminum terminal bar strip that's been caulked. And that's the way it should be, but there should be a counter flashing over that. And most of the time that's missing. We don't see that counter flashing to protect that terminal strip. So what happens is those caulking joints open up, and then moisture is getting down in there. A lot of guys miss that. They don't look for that counter flashing. And that is the correct way, according to the Roofing Association, that should be flashed in order to protect the roof membrane from water getting under it. And that a lot of times we see, we'll call tenting, and that where the membrane is actually pulled away from the parapet wall or pulled away from the roofing, because there are no vents up in some of these older buildings between the ceiling and the roof sheathing, and that. So the vapor drive is coming up, but it has no way to escape. So it starts building up and creating these blisters and tenting at the walls and that. So that's a problem, because eventually it's going to get big enough that it's going to rip the membrane in that. So we see ripples up there, and a lot of guys may call out ripples, but I don't think that they know what the real problem is, that we're not getting rid of that moisture and that vapor that's underneath there. You mentioned about coping stones. Excuse me. One of the things about the coping stones is a lot of times they're mortared or they're tarred in there. Really, they shouldn't be mortared or tarred. They should be placed in there, set properly on stainless steel pins, and it should have a high masonry caulk in there, so it allows it to expand and contract with differential movement between the wall and weather conditions and things like that, so it doesn't open up and allow that moisture to get in there and then go down that wall assembly, and we've got problems on the interior in it. So those are some of the things we see on roofs. Not properly terminated at the gutters back there where the roof membrane goes into the gutter. It's not properly secured on the back of the gutter in that, so now it's subject to wind lift in that, or moisture getting in there. Some tar and gravel roofs, we see a lot of gravel scurrying, and the gravel protects the tar, from dehydration and everything, and channels the water to the source for drainage and that. So these are some of the things we see. Dean, how about you?
No, pretty much covered it. You can see abandoned chimneys. Wondering if they've done the abandoned chimneys. Sometimes you can tell how many layers are there, or you're looking at the stack vent and it's 2 inches above the roof. They got more than a single layer. That's pretty much it. George covered about most of it there.
Got it. So real good stuff there. All right, so let's jump into another big one is plumbing, right? And let's just start with what you can see coming out of the wall. Obviously galvanized versus copper. When you see galvanized piping, what does that mean? For someone who hasn't gone through this before, I want to start there and then also ask about actually scoping the water line, sewer line, etc.
Yeah. Well, galvanized piping, basically up until about the 1950s when we started to transition into copper and that. The problem with the galvanized is that it corrodes from the inside out. And most of the time, where we're going to see it or we're looking for problems with galvanized is right where the thread fittings are, where they connect to the elbow or the union or whatever, because that's the weakest point. So that gives us an indication if we see insipid staining around there or we see scaling in that, we know that there's a problem with that galvanized pipe. Also, when we go into a building, we're doing a functional flow test. So we're going to go in the unit, we're going to turn the water on, we're going to go in the bathroom, turn the faucet on, turn the shower on, and flush the toilet and see what type of water volume we have. And that if it decreases, we know that there's a problem with the piping and that. And if it's galvanized, there's a good chance that it's corroded in there. Also, one of the first signs will be, if it hasn't been used in a while, we're going to see rusty water. So we know that there's a problem going on there in that. And sometimes what some of these flippers do when we're in these buildings is they will change the horizontal runs on the galvanized and eliminate that and put copper, but then the verticals going up, they don't change. So they haven't really eliminated the problem. They've put a little bit more volume behind it. But when you do the functional flow, and by functional flow, I mean, we're turning everything on in that apartment. If there's a couple of bathrooms and the kitchen and everything, we want all the water going at once. And then we, flush the toilet and see what we get in that. So we can kind of determine that there's an issue there in that. But just seeing the galvanized lines down there, it's kind of a red flag going off. Hey, if we don't have a problem right at the moment, there could be future problems coming up here. We want to alert our client to that and talk to them a little bit about how galvanized corrodes from the inside and what to look for. What are some of the signs we're going to see? And one of the bigger issues it would be, if you've got a multi-property and you have tenants in that and they're using the shower and all of a sudden the water, you may get more hot water than you do cold or vice versa in that. So that could become an issue for a landlord or a building owner.
So what you're saying though is, if you see galvanized, even if you don't have problems now, there's galvanized is never a benefit of having, or even if you have no problems, you're eventually going to have problems or you're eventually going to have to change it out.
Right. We're most likely in our report, we're going to recommend that they budget for replacement in that as far as that goes. So what I would say is get a plumbing contractor in there and, have him give them a budgetary number for replacement, what it would take. Are walls going to need to be open? Can they, like we say, clean the lines out? Some of these places come in and they can ultrasonically clean it out. And that I'm not sure exactly how well that works as far as that goes. I know they've had good success and not good success. So the best thing is to optimize water flow is to have copper, definitely in that. So if you're looking at a building and maybe going to do some renovations on it and that, I would change to copper then right away when you're doing it, and eliminate that problem.
It brings up a good point because it depends on, what the investor plans on doing and how much they plan on spending. Are they just going to, they just want to buy it and not do anything, or are they going to buy it and do a lot of remodeling, move bathrooms, kitchens around? Then maybe it's not such a big deal. And the functional flow test should also be not just the first unit individually or the second unit individually. It should be done at the same time, because first floor is using it, you're going to decrease the pressure on the second floor. So the functional test should be doing all the units at the same time, not just one unit individually.
Yeah, your third floor tenants will be the first one to complain about water pressure in the shower, right? Like
Right.
farthest distance to travel.
Yeah.
So, all right, good stuff here. All right, let's talk windows. So it might seem like an obvious one, you know, a lot. We still walk a lot of these old brick two units that have the old pulley system, wood windows have been there forever. The owner might have put, you know, storms over them, like to help secure them, you know, or you know, you see the vinyl that got changed out 15 years ago, right? So I guess just talk to us a little about some of the different things you see out there, some of the warnings that you give your potential buyers.
Depends
I'll let
on
Dean.
it depends on how they're feeling. Some of them are worried about lead-based paint. Well, if you're going to buy an old building with, the pulley system, you're going to have lead-based paint more than likely. So if you're worried about that, you might just change them out. Um, if Again, it's going to depend on what your investor wants to do. If the windows are fine, there's nothing wrong with old windows with the storms on it. You still got a simple double pane. You're more worried about, are they going to open? Are they going to, are the sashes going to drop?
Yep.
That's mainly what we're looking for. Or a lot of times they'll change the windows out in the stairwells on the second, a 2-flat, 3-flat, and they don't put safety glass there, or they don't put safety glass in the bathrooms.
Yeah, and it's just the tempered glass. Obviously, I believe it's in a bathroom, over a bed, and 18 inches from the floor. Right? Are those?
Yeah,
Right.
and it should be in the stairwell too. Even though that's above 18 inches, you're in the stairwell. Also, they
Makes
really
sense.
should be in the kitchens. A lot of times they should be in the kitchens because you got the back porch back there. You're going down the stairs. A lot of them will not change those windows in the kitchen, but going down the stairs.
Yeah. True.
Okay. All right. Let's talk HVAC. I guess let's start here. We got a lot of boiler buildings, right? So let's say you got a 2-unit, 3-unit type building. You got a boiler in there. What are some of the things besides, okay, it's a boiler, it's older, but what are some specific things you're looking at just to look at the longevity and the functionality of it? And then let's also talk about, if it's not a boiler building, if you have separate HVAC, what are some of the things you're looking at there?
Okay. So, depending on whether it's a hot water boiler or it's a steam boiler, okay, there's different ways to look at it. Okay. First thing I want to do is I want to look when I come in, and I want to look at the boiler itself. I want to look at the exterior cabinet in that. If I see any type of burning or staining in that, or discoloration of paint, that kind of clues me into this section of the boiler. There's compound in between there, or there's seals in that. And now flue products are being leaked out. And actually, there's a problem there that we do have some flue leakage. I want to look at the venting of that boiler and see how it's venting, how it vents over to the chimney, what the vent connector looks like. So looking up inside that vent connector from either the diverter bell or wherever I can see it, if it's a draft diverter in the front of the boiler, and seeing if I see any type of sooting conditions in that, where it's possible that I have incomplete combustion going on. That lets me know that there could possibly be a blocked section in there, or the gas pressure is not proper, or we don't have enough combustion air in the building to mix properly and give us proper combustion. And I want to look at the piping and see what it looks like. Is it insulated? Okay, because we lose 5 times as much heat from the heating pipes if they're not insulated. And so that's one of the things that we want to do, is make sure. We want to conserve energy today, because energy is so costly in that. So they really should be insulated. And that I want to see, the relief valve. Is it a proper relief? Is it size for the boiler? I want to look at the extension on the relief valve and see if I see any ponding down there or dripping. I want to put my finger in the bottom of the extension pipe, excuse me, and see if it's wet, which lets me know that that valve is weeping. And that if it's hot water, I want to look at the circulators and see what they're doing. Are they operating properly? Are they running hot? And that, so possibly we're going to have a circulator that's going to go out in that. I want to look at what pressure it's running at. Is the pressure high enough for the building? So every pound brings us up 2.31 feet. So if I'm looking at a 3-story building, I probably want to have close to, with piping constraint, and at about 22 to 24 pounds of pressure in order to get the water up to the radiator in that. But what's my relief valve set at? Is it 30? Is my expansion tank? I'm going to knock on it and see what it is. Is it kind of waterlogged? Is there a lot of water? So I know I'm going to have some problems there. Has it been serviced regularly? Is it clean? There's a lot of things to look at.
So you got a lot of things, and then in addition to that, you have the radiators. I see a lot of people that like, oh, I got a brand new boiler, but it throws all the 120-year-old radiators and disappear. How are you looking at radiators inside maybe some of the physical units?
Basically, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go up and I'm going to look at them. One, I want to look at the bleeds, make sure that we can get the water up there. Okay, if that's what we're doing, or steam, because if we can't get the air out of the radiator, it's not going to function properly. I want to look at the air movement, because not only does hot water radiant or radiators, okay, we do radiate heat, but we also have to have convection around that radiator too. So what do we have? Carpeting below there where we're not getting air across that radiator? It's not functioning properly. Are there 20 coats of paint on there, which is creating a different dynamic for the heating surface to emanate the heat into the space? What's the piping look like? Do the valves operate properly, or do I see that they're leaking, or they're never been adjusted or anything? If it's a steam system, is the radiator, if it's a single pipe, is it have a tilt so condensate runs back? Are the air vents working on a steam system? If we can't get the air out, the steam can't move in the radiator, so it's pointless. And what temperature are we running? If we're running baseboard, okay, we want to have it up around 180, maybe 200 degrees to get good heating out of it. And do we have a mixture of old church radiators and baseboards? So the system is doing what's called priming. It's bouncing around because you can't intermix the systems as far as that goes with a baseboard radiator and then a church type radiator or low radiator. In that they don't work well. Are they contained in radiator cabinets? Almost one of the worst things they ever came up with, because they cut the airflow down in that. So there's a lot of issues to look at on radiators. It's not, Dean and I take a different approach to inspecting in that. So we want to know everything we can know about that system so that we can translate that to our client, because basically we're communicators, okay? That's our primary business. Yes, we're inspectors, but we're communicators. We communicate what the systems, what the building's telling us to the client so that they can feel comfortable. If they're making a purchase or if they're having problems, we can give them the facts, the observations that we see, and the guidance to get this corrected.
So what I hear then, that it's important, if you have a boiler building, either A, have an inspector that is knows as much as you just rattled off, or B, having a separate boiler specialist come out there, because there's so much stuff that could go wrong or be potential red flags.
Yeah, that's true. And, if it's not working properly in that, and, we're not getting rid of the heat and we're sending back water to this boiler, hot water, we could thermal shock that boiler and, end up cracking sections. The boiler's not going to last as long because the heat exchanger is going to constantly be expanding and contracting. And pretty soon metal fatigue is going to take place and it's going to, snap in that. So there's a lot of things about hydronic systems that are different than forced air systems.
I talked to a guy a couple of days ago, bought a 12-unit building, and he said that he messed up because he made the decision to not get the boiler checked out in detail, and now he's got a $38,000 expense he's figuring out because he didn't realize how old the thing was. He saw some newer parts on the unit and thought the thing was newer, but it ended up the actual unit was about 45 years old or something like that. So
two quick questions real quick. I want to stay on this for a second.
Sure.
For those who have a boiler, single pipe steam, how often do you recommend flushing it? And then second question, the sensors, right? 12-unit building, does it make sense to pony up for the sensors in the unit to have more of a heat control, which you probably wouldn't do on a 2-unit building? But is there some sort of rule of thumb if you're talking to your investors? They're walking into a 6-unit, 8-unit, 12-unit building. There's no sensors in there right now. Just some rules of thumbs you can give to our listeners here on both those questions.
Yeah. Well, I say the main thing about steam boilers is they really should be blown down daily. Okay. As far as that goes. Now, I know a lot of people go weekly as far as that goes, but really we want to make sure that we blow that down. We want to make sure that that low water cutoff is actually working because we get a lot of what we'll call mud out of in the steam in that, which is the mineral content in that. Because in Chicago, we got about 5 grains of hardness in Lake Michigan water. So we're constantly making water up on the steam in that, and all that's going in the boiler. We want to flush that out because it starts building up in what we call the mud lakes at the bottom and continues up in the heat exchanger. And pretty soon we don't have enough water in the boiler to allow us to have enough steam in the steam chest. So we're diminishing our steam capabilities. So by blowing it down, we're assuring that we're getting those products out and that it's working, that the low water cutoffs works. And if it goes low, that it shuts the burners off in that. So that's something that the normal owner or the maintenance guy can do on a daily basis pretty easily. As far as that goes. And then once a week, we want to open it up wide and let it blow it way out and do like a skimming where we get any oil compound and along with the products and that goes out in that. As far as sensors, okay, most of these boilers.
Oh, Mark was jumping in. Mark, what do you got there?
Yeah, no, we'll wrap this because we want to keep it moving. But one other question on comment on radiators. So a lot of people I see him take them out. A guy a couple weeks ago sent me a picture of a mouse popping a head out of the little hole that it leaves in the hardwood floor. So people, when you're putting the HVA system in and removing your radiators, make sure you put the money in to plug those hardwood holes in the unit. So, but then one other thing on this that I want to make sure we don't miss, because this becomes something that people get scared of or everyone starts freaking out, is you mentioned insulation on the pipes, but those a lot of those pipes are asbestos wrapped and people are nervous about that. Is that one, I guess, is that something you're still seeing, and how do you recommend people deal with that, if anything at all, when it comes to having that on the pipes?
Yeah, we see a lot of that. Okay, you're talking about aerosol in that. Okay,
yes.
So what I'll say is, if it's intact at the moment, it only becomes friable when it's broken. Okay, that's where it's an issue. But what I would say is have a remediator come out and they can encapsulate it in place. Okay, rather than remove it, and it'll be fine. If it's broken and it's friable, or somebody has taken some of it off and done it in an improper fashion, then we need to have a remediator come out and do an air test. They need to do containment and get the rest of it gone and scrub it and get rid of it. But if it's in good shape, they can just encapsulate it with a hard coat material and it'll be fine. They can leave it. It's not. Now, some people do panic because it's asbestos and that. So we give them both options. We recommend that they do talk to a remediator and have them come out and take a look. There are a couple of options for this as far as that goes, and it's going to be what's best for them at that point. That goes in, we let him determine what would be the best thing to do for this condition, what would be the prudent correction for it.
Okay. All right. Before we jump off boilers, I want the answer to my sensor question that you started.
Yeah. So the sensor, understand that when these buildings were built, the theory of building science really didn't exist. It was, let it heat all and open the windows and get fresh air. That's what the thoughts were, and it was healthy. Today, we want to control that. So when you have a building that has, only like 2 units into that, what we want to do is put a return aquistat on there that senses what the condensate temperature is coming back. And as that condensate temperature gets hotter, we're going to shut the boiler down. Now, if we have a 6 unit or more in that, then we want to have a sensor located in one of the units that's going to control all the heating for those units. And that's going to be, you might use an Accustat, which is a preset bulb out there, which nobody can adjust it in that, or we may go into some of the newer controls, which have PID, which have kind of adaptive learning cycles and what that is, what the building is using in that, and they make that derivative, they change it, the variable, and control the boiler. So I would say when you have anywhere from about 4 units on up, you want to have a sensor, but below that, I would say just a strap-on Accustat on the return condensate piping to control it.
Oh, Tom, I don't know about you, man, but I've ran into the problems where you have 4, 6 units and you have 2 sensors, and one of the tenants with a sensor is
They have a space heater under it.
space heater, got her oven cranking, and everyone else is at like 40 degrees and they're at 110, and it screws everything up.
We had that. We
Yep.
also had one where the outside sensor went off. Like we didn't change the battery or it got busted. Or I can't remember what, but like that one went off. So then all of a sudden, like while we're trying to figure this out, we're manually just turning it on and off because you can't let it run all night. That'd be crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm by default over the last 2 years, I've learned a lot more about sensors. So, all right, let's talk about Dean. I'm gonna have you jump in here. Furnaces and AC. So you have a building that's already got HVAC in there. What are you guys looking at besides, all right, well, it was installed this year, but are you guys looking at the ductwork? How far do you take that? What are some things that, investors should be looking at if they're buying a building that already has HVAC in there and the condensers either on the roof or on the side?
You're looking at the duct. You are looking at the ductwork, see if they've got supplies in every room and seeing where their main return is. Depends on who did it. If they're putting the return right underneath, a lot of times they'll put it in the closet with the return right underneath the furnace. It really should be 10 feet away. Even if they put it around the corner, it would be better. So you're not pulling all the combustion air back. And it depends on what kind of furnace they're putting in. Are they doing, nowadays you would think they would do a high efficiency furnace, but if they're using a B vent, a lot of times, again, depends on who did it. Did they gang the vents together, which they really shouldn't do? So we are looking at where's the return ductwork put? Did they put return grills or at least bypasses coming through the bedrooms?
Yeah. So some of the other things we look at when we're doing that too is, how did they do that ductwork? Is it just a cap and tap plenum and it's going into a square box? Was it a graduated duct system so that we do push that airflow down on the return? Like Dean said, do we have a sweeping return coming in so we get good airflow across into our blower, across our heat exchanger? Or did they just bring it down and tap into it where we get discharge pooling down there and then it has to pressurize in order to get the air in there? So we're diminishing airflow. What type of filters do we have? Are they pleated filters, which cuts down the airflow? I like to say to clients, hey, use the little 1-inch filters, what in the vernacular I call the rock catchers, in that, because the filter basically protects the equipment. It's not for filtering the air for the client. It's protecting the equipment. And when we cut down that airflow, we are changing the dynamic of that equipment and making it run much hotter because it has to have proper airflow across it in that. So there's a lot of things to look at. And also, like Dean said about, are they using a category 1, which is kind of natural draft, and that not a cat 4, a condensing furnace? Does it have any communication with habitable space? Because we don't want any products to be spilling into the unit and that. So really it should be in a self-contained room if we're using a category 1. If it is a category 4, it's not a problem because it takes all the combustion air from the outside and exhausts to the outside. So those are some of the bigger things we're looking at.
What is the life expectancy of a furnace these days that you're recommending to people?
Probably about, if we're using high efficiency, in that about 15 years, could be 18. They can extend that if they do annual service on it. Okay, it could go up to 20 to 22 years. On the older systems, they were more durable and able to handle a lot of differential temperatures, especially if airflow got diminished in that. So those were more like 18 to 25 years on the older ones, and that. But the newer ones are about 15 years.
All right, that's good. It's good. Worst case scenario is consider. What about on the AC units, the outdoor units? What are that life expectancy on those?
Well, the average compressor is about 12 to 15 years in that. But a compressor is a mechanical device, so it could go out any time. And it also depends on whether it's being serviced regularly, how close is it to the building? Because a lot of times we see that the condensers are way too close to the building. We need to have at least 12 inches away from the building so that we can get good airflow around there. And then a lot of times they're right up against the wall. Well, now we're changing again the refrigerant dynamics, and we're making it run much hotter in that, and we're going to have problems. It's going to go out much sooner if it isn't serviced, and we're building up dirt and debris on the coil. It can't get rid of the heat. So again, it's changing things. How long is the line set that it has to go up? If the line set is really long, that's another thing that's putting a strain on that compressor in that. So there's a lot of variables involved in when we look at air conditioning.
So I was told rooftop units were lasted longer typically for second and third. If you have a 3-story building, second and third floor, and that's because the airflow, right? I imagine that's what you're saying. And then the first floor, I would always go out first, and that's because the line set is longer. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, the rooftop units for second and third floors are great. Okay, because we have the space to get the airflow around it. Okay, also the refrigerant lines going down, we're able to carry the oil because refrigerant does take oil with it. It has oil in it. So we're able to get that oil to move through the line set pretty easily. If we have a large rise for that oil, it has a tendency to fall. You would have to have traps in there to trap that oil so the refrigerant would continue to pick it up. That's the correct way to do it. Nobody does that today as far as that goes, because the guys that put this, and no discredit to HVAC contractors, I was one for 30 years, okay, but it's slam it in, get it done, and it works. We got a 50-foot line set, the manufacturer says it's okay. Well, yeah, it is, but there's some things that have to change when you do a 50-foot line set. So but yes, rooftops are much better as far as that goes. Yes.
All right, cool. That's it's something very specific to Chicago. Talk a little bit about masonry and then lentils around the windows, which kind of ties into that conversation. Talk to us about what we should be looking for, what you're looking at when you're looking at a brick building.
I'll let Dean do that one.
Well, the one thing I would do with your clients is when they're buying a big building, it depends. I mean, if most of your investors are buying 2-3 flats and stuff, so they're going to be they want the outside look at. So I mean, we're looking to see if the lintel's moving. A lot of times in the front of the building, the face is not tied to the side, so they should be looking up at the side to see if there's any movement. We have seen it where the front is pulling away. Also on a lot of the brick buildings, depends on where you're buying. They should check to make sure if they think it's a slab, they should make sure it's not on a crawl, because sometimes you'll see those where the brick on the inside under the crawl is actually deteriorating. And around the lintels, mainly looking for cracking, see if they're expanding, see if the front's pushing out. As you're looking at the sideways at the building, and you're looking up to make sure there's no bulging, and that'll tie into the parapet walls too. Make sure they're not bulging out or bulging in.
People don't typically know what lentils are till they have the first problem with a lentil. They're like, oh, those things are there. What are, the lentils, the piece of metal that's going over the window that's holding the brick load above it from crashing down your window, just for FYI for everybody. But what are some things that cause lentils to go bad or become to have it, or start to have issues, I guess?
Probably the worst thing that you see 99% of the time in Chicago is the guys always wrap them. They always wrap the lintels, and now that moisture that's not getting out is now staying in there, and it's accelerating the rusting process on those lintels. That's probably the worst thing we ever see is they always wrap the lintels.
All right. So encapsulate asbestos, don't encapsulate lentils is what I'm taking away from today's show.
unless it's an asbestos lintel.
Let me ask about the staircase cracking, right? That's like a real common one, right? You see it's cracking, and it's creating that staircase along the mortar joints. Like, it's almost every brick building has it to some degree. Yeah. What is that usually an easy fix? Is that something like how alarming is that when you see it?
It's not that alarming. I mean, get your lintels it's an angle iron, so the masonry is sitting on the bottom leg. It's just expanding and cracking, and above the window, all they're doing is pulling out that triangle. The angle iron is just holding up the triangle above the window. If we're talking mainly brick buildings where you got 2 or 3 widths in Chicago, it's not that alarming. It just needs to be replaced. If it's bulging out far, then maybe you got a little bit more going on. Maybe you're moving two widths of brick instead of just one. But that's pretty extreme. You know,
Gotcha.
it is costly. I mean, let's say you got 40 windows you're looking at and they're all bad. Well, there's something else probably going on because your roof may be bad and you're getting moisture coming down through all those widths more than just, oh. So you got to look at it once you get that.
I'll tell you where it's
One or
bad.
two.
It's bad when the city gets involved. Now you got to get a permit for everything and do everything perfect.
Yeah,
That's where it's
scaffold
bad.
the whole thing.
All right. So you
Scaffold
avoid
it
that.
and
It
grind
never
it.
is that bad.
So,
But probably the front. The front's probably when you see movement in the front, it's probably more of an issue because a lot of those fronts are not tied to the sides.
Gotcha. So you're saying the facade of the front is usually not tied to the
Correct.
side. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen them where they are not tied to the sides.
Gotcha. All right. Cool. Yeah.
so what can I interject for a second?
Yeah, for
One
sure.
of the other things that we look at on masonry buildings, which really gets kind of overlooked by a lot of people, is how did they tuck point that building? Okay. A lot of them we see now are done in the European style, okay, which is a convex, okay, where it actually comes outside the mortar joint, outside the brick. And what they've done when they do that is they've created a horizontal projection there on those joints, which didn't solve any issue. Now that water's just going to sit there and it's going to deteriorate more. So when we see European tuck pointing, we're going to point that out pretty well and recommend that, probably get somebody in there to grind that out and actually tool that joint the way it should be. Because a lot of times that mortar's not the original strength either that the old mortar was. So the two of them aren't going to mix, and it's going to be flaking off and cracking. And then we've got spalling, and we're going to have individual masonry units that are going to deteriorate. And it's just going to exacerbate the situation from what it was.
Wow. So that looks pretty sometimes. Like it looks nice.
It does.
It's like the worst thing you could be doing is what I'm hearing from you here.
Yeah, it is. And
it makes sense because the water's just collecting on top of it now.
Yeah. And it just sits there. And one of the first tenets of moisture management is no horizontal projections. We want to get the water away, slope it away, right? So,
And George brings up a good point. A lot of people will use more of a concrete than a mortar for the bricks, and then that's a lot harder. Then all of a sudden that'll start popping off because you're getting moisture in there, and the efflorescence is still trying to pop out.
Yeah,
it's the same thing with when you start seeing the parging going up the walls. They're trying to manage it, but the water's still migrating up and popping. So you started with a 2-foot parge, and now you got a 4-foot parge.
Gotcha. All right, one more area I want to make sure we dive into before we move on here in this conversation. But another thing that no one knows that exists until they have a problem usually with is a catch basin. So talk to us a little bit about catch basin or the sewer lines or kind of water leaving your building and things that you're looking at.
Yeah.
I'd always recommend getting a camera inspection, especially you get into like the medical district over there off of Western area. A lot of those sewer lines are tied together. So you want to get a camera inspection, not only to get the catch basin checked out, you want to see where that sewer line's going, because your sewer line may run through your neighbor's yard, or your neighbors may run through yours and tie in and then go to the street.
I've heard that before. I've heard that if you're in, call it Tri-Taylor, kind of Little Italy, like Pilsen,
yes.
over there, that whole near southwest side, it's all the more important. You have a lot of overhead sewer lines as well too that just make it a messier situation. So that's right. A great point. I'm happy you brought that up.
So I would recommend getting a sewer. Go ahead. Sorry, Mark.
I was just say the catch basin. So explain to everyone kind of what the catch basin's purpose is for in some of these places. And I think some of them are getting removed as the building gets updated and so forth. But some of these older buildings that are been touched, they still have this catch basin where stuff's collecting, or you have to get it pumped out, or it has to have some maintenance to it. Tell us a little bit about that.
Most of the time it was just for laundries and for kitchen sinks where it was catching the grease. And they just, come around once a year and clean it out. And now a lot of times, when they remodel, they usually get rid of them because you're moving everything.
But if you do have them, it becomes a place that you could potentially back up and collect stuff that is not getting pushed through, correct?
Correct. And when we're doing buildings, we check them because a lot of times you can find sewage in them, which then is you're having an issue with your main sewer line backing off into the catch basin.
Gotcha. Awesome.
Cool. All right, so we're covering a lot here, and this is all kind of preluded on someone purchasing a building. But in our previous conversations, you guys had mentioned there's, besides when you make the purchase, there are other times when an inspection or an assessment makes sense. So just give us some of those examples that our listeners might not be thinking of, they shouldn't just be calling their home inspector at the time of purchase. Talk about some of the property condition assessments that you also provide.
Well, I would say, number one, when to get an inspector is kind of when you're experiencing some problematic conditions in your building, your purchase building, like possible moisture intrusion in the building, roofing problems that are taking place, heating supply problems, like we kind of talked about today, general plumbing problems, inadequate water flow and that. If you're remodeling or if you're renovating, you probably want to have an inspector, take a look and see what's going on, checking on contractors, seeing if things are being done right, or, are there things that they're overlooking on that. If you're going to do maybe an electrical upgrade for the building, a lot of them have older 60 amp services for units in that. If you're going to go to 100, what are the GFCIs up there? How is the kitchen? Do we have enough outlets in that as far as that goes? So those are some of the things that you would do, but a property condition assessment is a little bit different. Property condition assessment is it's a comprehensive evaluation of the building or the real estate and that. And what we're doing is we're looking at the building as a whole. We want to see, what the systems are, how well are they being maintained, what's the age of those systems, are they functioning properly, are they near term for replacement in that. And we follow that. It's conducted by an ASTM 2018 standard in that. So what it does is it allows us to look at the building and say, okay, this is what's happening now. Is there a potential for a problem here? The way the roof is, maybe the drainage is not properly. And we want to catch that before it becomes a bigger problem, if possible. Or what's, on an ASTM, there's a couple of ways to look at that. We can do it as just a property condition, or we can do it at possible replacement costs. So is it a 30-year roof and we're in 20? What's the probable cost for it going to be, so that it could be a budgetary number and that, but it also gives us the kind of the true market value of that building at that point. And that could also be used with the assessor at tax evaluation, because maybe the building's not worth what they're saying it's worth. If you've got roofing problems and plumbing problems and different problems, if you have a documented PCA here, and that you can take that in there to them and say, okay, well, my building is not like the building next door. I have these problems. That would be through a lawyer, not us, naturally, in that, but it will help to change the tax structure a little bit. You may pay less, or, if it's in better condition, it may be higher. That would be a newer.
So don't you, if your building's in good condition, just if it's not there yet?
Yeah. And that, so use it to the best of your advantage. But there's a number of ways to look at PCAs and what they can do as far as that goes. So,
well, a PCA can basically create some framework for what you have to budget for the next X amount of years, or handle today. Similar to an HOA is going to kind of create their CapEx plan over the next 10, 15 years. They have to do studies like this, and this is one that creates that. So it's pretty smart for, especially when you get into people that have these bigger buildings, and it doesn't just cost $2,000 to replace something. It costs $220,000 to replace the smallest things now. So I like that type of idea. It's a small investment to kind of create that framework.
Yeah.
All right, cool. What is you guys are up to date on all the laws. You dropped a lot of acronyms here today that I'm not even sure 100% of that stuff, but you guys are up to date on the codes, the laws. And you guys are part of all the functions, the different groups behind that. What's changing in the industry in the next 10 years? Codes, energy efficiency programs, anything that you can share with us?
Well, you know what? What's changing? We'll say, okay, it's going to be important to boost the energy efficiency of buildings, basically, that you guys are looking at. So some of the ways that that'll be established is, guys like us will be doing more energy audits on buildings and helping the owners understand how they can save energy and possibility of using renewable energy, because this is going to become a big thing with buildings, especially like with solar and some of the wind and geothermal that can be used now. We have the technology, it's being perfected in that. And we're seeing that some of these manufacturers are making certain panels for these building roofs to be able to do solar on them and that. A lot of it will be in newer buildings, more daylight utilization, so that we're not relying on lighting and stuff like that in building renovations. And that insulation upgrades will be a big issue as far as that goes with some of these buildings, and that in order to maintain the building envelope, try and keep that energy from losing it, and that updating HVAC equipment and ventilation, or possibly replacing it and buying more energy efficient, equipment, and that lighting system upgrades, and controlling the lighting systems that are in there. Also, AI will have a big integration in the industry in that, and it's going to do more of, we'll say, the proportional, which is the amount of energy that's going to be used in that, and then the integral, how much is going to be necessary, and the derivative, which is going to be the variable, how is it going to adjust. So it's going to have the adaptive intelligence to learn what the building needs and how it can cut energy in that and still keep everybody happy and comfortable. These are the things that I see coming. I saw some of it starting when I was getting out of the industry. They were starting to do a little bit of smart controls for boilers and smart controls for buildings and that. So it's more prevalent than it was before. And yes, it's a little costly to get this equipment in there and that, but the return on the investment is going to be huge.
Yeah, so I listened to everything you're saying, and it all makes sense. And you can see that's where we're going from a technology standpoint. It offsets some of the ability to make things affordable on a larger scale, and that's some of the issues that I think our city specifically is running into. So I always hope that with this new innovation comes a way to do it across the board or at scale more affordably to help that problem out.
Yeah.
We're starting to see more mini splits go into some of these multi-unit buildings instead of furnaces and air conditioners, more mini splits.
Yeah, that's pretty cool too. Yep.
Cool.
All right.
Cool. You ready to wrap, Mark?
Yep, I'm ready, man. You guys got some questions. We'll do a little fire round here. So you guys ready?
Sure. Yeah.
All right. Whoever wants to answer these, you can choose. I don't care. We just need one of you. What is your competitive advantage? How have you been able to do this for so many years while others wish they could?
I think basically it's because we look at things differently. I think we're more in tune with our clients. When we do an inspection, we kind of try to preface that inspection as to what is the client looking for? Are they just looking for an inspection, how the building is? Do they want to know more about structure? We want to know what the client's going to do with the building. And I think our diverse background gives us a better opportunity to assist our client in that. We listen to our clients in that, and we spend more time, not so much at the inspection, but Dean and I, afterwards, we collaborate on a lot of things as to what we saw, what do we think, how could this be better, or is this a big potential problem or just a minor thing in that? And then we get our client involved and we go over things with them. So we're kind of, we want our clients to have, let me put it this way, say total enjoyment of their building and have no problems, basically.
All right. What is one piece of advice you would tell someone that is yet to buy their first property here in Chicago?
I would do due diligence, and I would check the violation sites, building site on Chicago. I would check the zoning. And if you really want to know if it's a 2-flat, 3-flat, someone's selling it, I mean, you can get the self-cert sometimes doesn't work. So you could pull water records on a building.
Yeah, or
Alright.
demand the zoning cert from the from the seller, right? Like understand
Yeah,
what you're buying. It makes a big difference.
yeah, but sometimes that zoning cert is good, sometimes it's bad. I've seen them flip both ways.
Yep.
All right. You guys can both answer this. Besides looking up building codes and understanding all the changes, what do you guys do for fun?
Well, I spend time with my grandkids, and that like to take them out. They're big baseball enthusiasts. They play a lot of baseball and that. So we do a lot of things, going out to parks, playing baseball, spending time with them. Like to go out with friends to dinner, and just have a good time, basically.
Awesome.
And that a lot of family involvement.
Awesome.
Me, I got a contractor friend up here, so I usually helping him.
Can't get out. All right. Give us a good book, podcast, or a self-development activity that you would recommend to our listeners.
So right now I'm reading a book called Eat That Frog, and that it's about procrastination, and that how to eliminate procrastination. When you're in the morning, you want to swallow the big frog first, and that the rest of them go down easy. So you want to get the hard task out of the way. You want to be more efficient about doing your task. So basically, that's what the book is teaching you: how to be more efficient in time management, and how to be more of a decision maker and getting these things done. And that, so
Good book,
it's
easy read, less than an hour on audiobook. So
yeah,
double
There you
speed.
go.
So maybe less than 2 hours.
yeah.
All right. Besides yourself, name one person in your local network you'd highly recommend to other investors as a quality resource.
Dan Cullen.
Yeah, Dan, definitely.
What does Dan do?
He's a
Dan used to
retired.
own. Okay.
Go ahead, George.
Oh, no, that's all right. I'll let you go.
He used to own Domicile Consulting, and now he's semi-retired.
All right. We'll hunt him down and link to him in the show notes. So, George, Dean, thank you guys so much. You provide a ton of value to our listeners. How can they learn more about you? Is there any way they can provide value to you?
Well, basically, they can learn more about us by going to our website in that, or giving us a call at 773-716-3560. Be more than happy to discuss anything with a investor, prior to them buying a building, help them out as to, some of the things that they should, look at in that, and see if we're able to help them in that at any time.
All right. Mark, are you ready for the Chicago Fact?
Oh man, I'm ready for it. And I pulled out somebody I know out of the hat. It's actually who we're playing for today is Jason Marcordes. He left us a review on iTunes. So thank you, Jason, for leaving that. Remember, listeners, we're putting everyone that leaves reviews, so long as your name's clear in there, into get the opportunity to be part of the Chicago Fact. And Jason, if myself, man, you got even 3 people here, myself, George, or Dean get this right today, you get a $50 gift card brought to you by our sponsor today. Our sponsor is Patrick P from Assured Partners. So hopefully, Tom, if his multiple choice, maybe throw in a 5th one to make it a little more tricky.
I was gonna say, yeah, he's got a good shot here. Also, episode 101 for those want to know more about Will County with Jason. So
yeah.
All right. So, Mark, the side note to all this, I'm reading Boom Bust Exodus, talking about Galesburg, Illinois. Really cool book, and a lot of like the union movement, and just it's a really good read. I'm halfway through it, but it got me thinking of Pullman and some of the labor stuff. So today's question is along those lines. So in 1892, Florence Kelley was called upon by Congress to investigate the labor conditions of Chicago's garment industry. She achieved radical reforms. Which of these is the only thing she did not achieve in those reforms? So she got 3 of the 4 of these things passed. And they are A, the 8-hour workday, B, a ban on child labor, C, the half-hour lunch break, or D, regular inspections of factories. The Chicago garment industry, she got 3 or 4 of these reforms pushed through. Which one did she not get pushed through?
All right, so I'm going to go with the 8-hour workday, because I don't think that's something that even came into the 20s or something like that. So that's what I'll go with. What do you guys think?
George, Dean, throw a guess out there.
I'm going to say the regular inspection of the factories.
All right, Dean.
I'm gonna go with I am gonna go with the 8 hour labor also.
All right.
Oh man, guys, she did all this. She did not get the half-hour lunch break.
Oh, oh, she got 8 hour for the garment. So was it for the garment district only?
Correct.
Oh, I was thinking across all union labor. Oh, never mind.
Yeah, so she was like a huge influence who I've never heard of before, by the way.
Yeah, she was in that book. They talked about her in that Pullman book that one about where we talk about the unions. Oh man, sorry, Jason.
Yeah, I'm gonna text him right now. He lost. He doesn't even know he lost.
All right. You got your name dropped though, so that's cool. All right, Jason. We'll put your name back in. You get opportunity for get back on the Chicago Fact here in the future. Man, Dean and George, thanks for coming on. Tom, thank you as always. Listeners, Jason got in there because he left his review. If you leave a review on iTunes or anywhere you can leave the reviews, I know our guy Lance is going through those and putting your name into the hat. Now you have to put your name because there's somebody the other day that was like Big Dick 09 or something like that, and they left his review. I'm like, I don't even know how to find you, and I'm not going to search that. So make sure you put your name at the bottom, and we'll throw you into that entry, and you can get part of this Chicago Fact. So, Dean, thank you. George, thank you. Tom, love it. Listeners, we'll see you next week.
Thanks all.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.